Welcome to the Q Podcast.
Q is about conversation.
If we're really concerned about ending poverty, we've got to be more concerned about creating justice.
Our cultural products as Christians need to both defy and resonate with the culture.
And God's doing amazing things. His church is expanding, his church is growing.
It's not what's the purpose of my life, it's what is the purpose that's been assigned.
Stay curious, think well, advance good. This is Q.
With his friends asleep, with blood breaking through his skin, with Judas on the way and the wrath of God to follow, he immediately tells his father, "Nevertheless, not as I will, but your will be done."
What does it mean for us as Christians to deny ourselves? In American life, in the American church, many cases, there hasn't been that much of a call for self-denial. But we realize in recent years, the sexuality conversation that has been a part of many of the conversations amongst denominations and churches has really exposed a major flaw in how we think in the church, where we've looked at people who have a different sexual orientation or have approached and feel differently about these things, to where we simply just say, hey, you need to live a certain way, and we're going to require that of you, and yet maybe not require anything of ourselves. And the reality is we've forgotten what it means to deny ourselves, and we can't ask others to deny something of themselves if we're not doing it ourselves, if we're not being faithful.
True self-denial cannot be done with human effort. It is only possible to say no to self once you have said yes to Christ.
Welcome to another edition of the Q Podcast. Now, if you haven't heard of Jackie Hill Perry, she's a writer, she's an artist. Her work has been featured in national media, but she's also like a YouTube sensation. I mean, she's had millions of views of a lot of her spoken word poetry, where she puts into word in a beautiful form how she's thinking, what she's feeling, and why she thinks it matters. And I think you're just going to be drawn to Jackie Hill Perry's honesty. In this talk, she really shares about a topic that we thought was critical to address at Q this year. And it's the idea of self-denial, because it's a very personal thing for Jackie Hill Perry. She talks very publicly about being saved from being in homosexual sin, and that she's changed her life, that she's chosen a different path. And it's a very difficult topic for some to hear, because they maybe disagree with it or think that's not possible, or I don't understand why that's helpful to people. But it's hard to argue with the source. It's hard to argue with somebody who's telling you their story. And so let's listen in and hear Jackie Hill Perry share her story and her passionate conviction for what it means for us to think well about denying ourselves.
It was pretty dark that night in the Garden of Gethsemane. Jesus and the disciples had just shared a meal together. And afterwards, he brought them there. It was one of his favorite places to pray. He asked them to sit and watch while he talked to his Father. After walking a short distance from them, he didn't lift up his eyes to heaven to speak with God, like he did when he let Lazarus live again. This time, he fell on his face, with his back towards the sky and his body full of sorrow. He asked his Father if it was a possibility that the cup could pass from him. Seeing that nothing was impossible for God, this question being posed God was the only person capable of changing Jesus' circumstances. Jesus just wanted to know if there was another way to go about the task before him. But the Father does not respond, audibly at least. In the silence, with his friends asleep, with blood breaking through his skin, with Judas on the way and the wrath of God to follow, he immediately tells his Father, "Nevertheless, not as I will, but your will be done." Jesus understands how it feels to deny your body what it wants. The call to self-denial is not a foreign idea to God. He lived for 33 years with continual and constant and strategic and tangible and real temptation. Him being man meant he could legitimately experience what it means to be human, mainly what it means to be weak. And him being God meant he could and would resist successfully every single time. When self-denial and sexuality are used in the same sentence towards those who are same-sex attracted, there are many responses, but two are expressed most often. They are offense and discouragement. Offense because there lies in many the belief that they have the right to do what they want to do, love who they want to love, and be whomever they choose to be. This is the mantra or the doctrinal statement of our culture. So for anyone, mainly Christians, to say that homosexuality is not to be applauded or approved, but to be repented of and denied sounds completely obnoxious and puke-worthy. If we all just existed for the sole purpose of our own autonomy, then surely no person or religion should have the right to define what is right or wrong. But that logic would only make sense if God did not exist. But seeing that he does, all of creation must reckon with the reality that they are indeed created, and being so, then they are subject to the will of the Creator. Jesus, who though he was in the form of God, did not count equality with God a thing to be grasped, but emptied himself, taking the form of a servant. The crazy thing about Jesus is that if anybody has rights, it was him. He was and is God. All things were created through him and for him, yet he lay aside his rights and chose to become a servant. The offended are offended because they think that they are better than God. A servant is not greater than its master, remember. If the creator of the universe laid aside his rights for the glory of God and the good of man, why would we ever think that we should be exempt from the same call? The other common response is discouragement. Discouragement exists because same-sex attraction is real. Many do not choose those desires. That is not to say that there is a such thing as being born gay, but there is indeed the reality of being born broken. Broken by sin. Sin is very demanding. If it is in you, it must have all of you, including your affections. Being one who understands same-sex attraction, I can get how disheartening it could be to hear that the affections within you that are so real and present and seemingly so a part of who you know yourself to be must be denied. The unattainability of it all manifests itself as discouragement, but its root is unbelief. In the Garden of Gethsemane, Jesus asked the Father 3 times if the cup could pass from him. And do you know what the Father said? Nothing. But do you know what the Father did? He sent an angel from heaven. To do what? Did he send the angel from heaven to bring Jesus back to heaven before the cross? Or did he send an angel from heaven to smite Jesus' enemies so that he wouldn't have such a terrible time getting to Calvary? Or did he send an angel from heaven to take away his fears and his anxieties and pain and sorrow and every single feeling or temptation that his body brought about? Did God let Jesus skip the pain of obedience? No. He sent an angel to strengthen Jesus so that he could endure. There are some of us, yes, us, some of us who will never know what it means to have a sincere attraction for the opposite sex. There are some of us who will be called to a life of singleness. There are some of us that even in our heterosexual marriages, we will struggle with believing or missing our former lives. There are some of us who day after day after day, we will have to fight to believe that this body does not belong to us, but to God, who made our bodies for his glory and his fame and his honor. God the Father sent an angel to strengthen his son. And he has done the same for those who have repented of their sins and put their faith in his name. The difference is he has sent someone so much better. He has sent himself in the person of the Holy Spirit to help us obey. True self-denial cannot be done with human effort. It is only possible to say no to self once you have said yes to Christ. The Garden of Gethsemane is the hope of both the offended and the discouraged. It is where we see God continuing to let go of his rights. It is where we see God weak and weary by what his obedience demands. The cup that he so desperately wanted to pass from him held the consequences of our unbelief. And guess what? He drank that cup to the last drop, so that all who are thirsty may be satisfied. Praise the Lord that he didn't let pride or hopelessness taint his faith in the living God. Jesus knew that the only true joy available was in the will of God. 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verses 3-4 says this: "For this is the will of God, your sanctification, that you abstain, that you flee, that you deny, that you run away from sexual immorality, that each one of you know how to control his own body in holiness and honor." Though the culture shifts and is constantly changing its mind and is making it seem as if we have the freedom to do what we want, God has not changed his mind. Therefore, his character and thus his will have not changed either. He has commanded. We must respond. My hope is that when we do say no, that we say it to the right person. Thank you.
So sincere, so convicted, and I think that's how we all felt when we heard this talk from Jackie Hill Perry. What an amazing woman, an amazing testimony, and very powerful to hear somebody share who's come from her experiences, from her history and her background to really help us better understand what it really looks like and what it cost us to follow Jesus. I hope you'll share this with a friend to encourage them in their walk with Christ and how they're living out their life and the tough choices that we make as Christians to deny ourselves, even when the world around us might say, hey, this is good for you, or it's fine, or don't worry about it. That as Christians, part of bearing our cross means that we're walking away from some of those things, and it's not always easy. You can watch this talk online, and I would encourage you to do that at qideas.org, featured either on our homepage or by searching Prophetic Witness by Jackie Hill Perry, and you can share that with your friends and maybe even use it for a small group conversation, maybe over dinner. Share this with a few friends, 9 minutes, share this podcast, say, hey, listen to this, let's talk about this. What does this look like for us? And how can this be a part of helping us follow Jesus more? I hope it encourages you. I hope it gives you new language even in how you're thinking about some of the difficult conversations and topics and issues that you're dealing with on a daily basis. That's why we're here, is to help inform you on how to engage our cultural moment. And I hope today's podcast did that for you well. Until next time, I'm Gabe Lyons and look forward to the next edition of the Q Podcast.